Now in this video, I've got the 2N7000 N-channel E Mosfet. Across the front of the transistor, I've got a 10-volt DC source. And on the drain side, I've got a 500 ohm resistor. On the source side, I've got a 300 ohm resistor. On the gate, I've got a 1K ohm resistor in series with a 3-volt DC source in series with a 1 kilohertz 1-volt peak-to-peak sinusoidal. So I am inputting a sinusoidal at the gate. Now the idea is that I input a small sinusoidal signal, and on the output I get a much bigger signal. Now, how much bigger will the output signal be? The gain of the transistor is I'm going to call it GV. The gain equals the 500 ohm resistor over 300 ohms equals. And so I've got 500 ohms divided by 300 ohms. That gives me a voltage gain of 1.66 volt, 1.66. Now, that means that on a 1-volt peak-to-peak signal, I'm going to get a voltage out here of 1.6 volts peak-to-peak. 1.66 volts peak-to-peak. That means if this middle line here is 0 volts, all right, what that means is that this will be 0.83 volts at the top. And the bottom will be minus 0.83 volts. Now, I've got a 500 ohm resistor here. All right. Now, when I apply the 3-volt DC and the current begins to flow, I'm going to get about a voltage of 2.5 volts here, of 2.55 volts. Now, that voltage will generate a current of 2.55 volts divided by 500 ohms that will give me a drain current of 5.1 milliamps. Now, I take 5.1 milliamps and I multiply that by my 300 ohm resistor, and that will give me my voltage across my source resistor. So 5.1 milliamps times 300 ohms, that gives me a source voltage of 1.53 volts. Now I need my VDS voltage right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract these two voltages from my 10 volt DC source. So I'm going to go 10 volts minus 2.55 volts minus 1.53 volts, and that gives me a VDS voltage of 5.92 volts. Now, this 5.92 volts will be added to my 1.53 volts, and what that will do is that will raise my 0 volts here up. All right, I'm going to redraw this over here. I'm going to redraw the output over here. Okay, so I'm going to add 5.92 volts plus 1.53 volts. That gives me 7.45 volts. Now, that voltage is now my DC offset. So now, this will change and this will change. So now, I'm going to add 7.45 volts onto my 0.83 volts. 7.45 plus 0.83. I'm going to redraw my sinusoidal output. I'm going to get a voltage of 8.28 volts at the top. Now on the bottom, I'm going to add 7.45 volts onto minus 0.83 volts. 7.45 minus 0.83. At the bottom, I'm going to get 6.62 volts. Now the difference between these two voltages will still be 1.66 or 1.66 volts. And this brings me to the end of the video. Subscribe, like, share. Subscribe, like, share. Thanks for your attention. And I forgot to mention, if you notice that this sinusoidal is kind of reversed, that's because it is 180 degrees out of phase with my input.